Lorien had always known that being a diplomat for the human colonies would involve strange encounters. He had been to distant worlds, met countless alien species, and navigated through tense negotiations. But nothing had prepared him for the Ellerith. When his starship touched down on the lush green planet of Valaris, Lorien's heart raced. The Ellerith were a proud, ancient species known for their strange customs, especially their traditions around relationships. As part of his mission, Lorien was asked to observe and respect their cultural practices. One of those practices involved a formal inspection before a person could even think about entering a serious relationship. It was a ritual that was deeply woven into the fabric of their society, and Lorien had heard rumors about it. The air was thick with the sweet scent of foreign flowers as Lorien was escorted through the capital city of Cerulean. The streets were lined with tall, crystal-like structures, and strange glowing orbs floated above them, casting a soft light on everything below. The people of this world were unlike any he had seen before. Tall, with skin that shimmered in shades of pale blue and violet, the Ellerith were a beautiful race, but their eyes, large, glowing, and intense, could almost see through you. Their gaze felt like an invitation and a challenge all at once. Lorien's guide, an Ellerith named Karen, led him to the palace, where the royal family resided. The palace itself was a masterpiece of alien architecture, with walls that seemed to hum with energy. It was both intimidating and mesmerizing, but Lorien's thoughts were focused on the task ahead. He was here to meet the princess. Princess Vera was a name spoken with reverence across the planet. She was known for her beauty, intelligence, and strength. But there was another reason she was famous. She was the one who had recently declared that she would follow the old tradition of the Ellerith and undergo the inspection process in the most public way. For her, it wasn't just a formality, it was a declaration that she would abide by the law just like everyone else. Lorien had been briefed on this peculiar ritual. He had expected it to be impersonal and quick, a mere check to see if both parties were healthy and suitable. What he didn't expect was the level of intimacy it would require. The law demanded that the inspection involved touching, observation, and a careful examination of the body. It was meant to ensure compatibility in both health and genetics, to determine if a relationship was feasible. For the Ellerith, it was a deeply personal and almost sacred process, but for a human diplomat like Lorien, it felt like an uncomfortable obligation. When he finally entered the room where the inspection would take place, his breath caught in his throat. Princess Vera stood before him, her tall figure bathed in soft light from the glowing orbs above. She was even more stunning than he had imagined. Her skin was a soft, shimmering silver, and her eyes, a deep purple, sparkled with intelligence and mystery. She had a calm, serene presence, but there was a strength in her that couldn't be ignored. It was obvious she was not only royalty but also a warrior in her own right. "Welcome, human diplomat Lorien," she said in a voice that was both soft and commanding. Her tone carried a hint of amusement, as if she knew exactly what he was thinking. "I trust you find our world different?" Lorien nodded, momentarily lost in the beauty of her voice. "Yes, Your Highness. Your planet is unlike any I've seen." Vera smiled, and it was a smile that seemed to hold secrets. "Then I will make this process as enlightening as possible." Lorien was suddenly aware of how nervous he felt. He wasn't nervous about the task itself, but about the woman before him. There was something about her that unsettled him, but in a way that felt oddly comforting. He had expected the princess to be aloof, distant, and formal, but instead, she was warm, welcoming, and strangely engaging. "Shall we begin?" she asked, stepping forward. Lorien hesitated for a moment, gathering his thoughts. This was a cultural exchange, he reminded himself. His job was to understand, not to judge. But as he watched Vera's movements, as she stood before him with that calm confidence, he realized something. This was more than just a simple ritual. This was a moment of vulnerability, and not just for him. "Yes, Your Highness," Lorien said, his voice steady. "Let us proceed." What followed was unlike anything he had expected. The ritual, as strange as it seemed, had an air of solemnity about it. Princess Vera stood still as Lorien examined her, his hands moving lightly over her body, checking for any signs of discomfort. It was a clinical, impersonal process on the surface, but underneath, there was a strange connection forming between them. Despite the formality of the ritual, Lorien couldn't help but notice the way her skin seemed to react to his touch. The soft glow intensified as he moved, as if it responded to his presence. And there was something about the way her eyes followed him, a deep understanding that seemed to pass between them. It was as if she wasn't just a princess undergoing a ritual. She was a woman, strong and proud, who had lived through battles of her own. When the inspection was over, Lorien stepped back, his mind racing. He hadn't expected to feel so drawn to her. It wasn't just her beauty that caught his attention. It was the way she carried herself, the strength in her every movement, and the quiet confidence that radiated from her. There was something about Vera that made Lorien want to know her more, to understand the woman behind the title. "Thank you, Lorien," Vera said, breaking the silence. "That wasn't so difficult, was it?" Lorien blinked, realizing that his hands were still tingling from the touch. "No, Your Highness. It was enlightening." She smiled again, and for a moment it felt as if they were no longer two strangers from distant worlds. They were simply two people, caught in a moment of connection. But Lorien knew that this was just the beginning. The real challenge was yet to come. Vera's gaze softened as she met his eyes. "I believe we have much to discuss, Lorien. The law may have brought us together, but it will be what comes next that will determine our future." Lorien nodded, a sense of unease settling over him. What had started as a routine mission was quickly becoming something far more complicated than he had ever imagined. After the inspection, Lorien found himself struggling to focus on his diplomatic duties. The Princess Vera had made a lasting impression on him. What should have been a brief encounter had turned into a moment that lingered in his mind long after it was over. He couldn't help but wonder about the woman behind the tradition, the princess who had seemed so at ease with the ritual, but whose eyes held a deeper, more complex story. As the days passed, Lorien's role as a diplomat kept him busy. Meetings with the Ellerith Council, discussions about trade agreements, and negotiations over the future of human-Ellerith relations filled his time. Yet, no matter how hard he tried to focus on his work, his thoughts often drifted back to Vera. The princess had a quiet strength that was hard to ignore. She was always surrounded by the most important people on the planet, but it was when she spoke with Lorien that he saw her true nature. There was a spark in her eyes whenever they exchanged ideas, a flicker of curiosity that made him feel as though she was waiting for something more. But what that more was, Lorien couldn't quite put his finger on. On the third day after their meeting, Lorien was invited to the royal gardens, a place of tranquility and beauty that reflected the peaceful nature of the Ellerith people. Vera had requested his presence. At first, Lorien thought it was simply for more discussions about the ongoing talks. However, when he arrived, he found that it was far more personal. "Lorien, I'm glad you could join me," Vera said, her voice as soft and warm as the gentle breeze that flowed through the garden. She was standing near a small pool of water, the surface of which shimmered with the light of the setting sun. "I wanted to show you this place. It is where I come, to think, to find clarity." Lorien smiled, trying to ignore the unease bubbling in his chest. "It's a beautiful place, Your Highness." She nodded, her gaze steady and focused on him. "It is. But I've always felt that beauty alone can't bring peace. Sometimes the mind needs more than just a view to quiet the storm inside." Lorien didn't fully understand what she meant, but he could sense the weight behind her words. She wasn't just talking about the garden or the view. She was speaking about something deeper, something personal. The silence between them was comfortable, yet filled with an unspoken tension. For the first time since their arrival, Lorien noticed how vulnerable Vera seemed. She wasn't the perfect, untouchable princess anymore. She was a woman, struggling with something he couldn't yet understand. "Tell me, Lorien," she said, breaking the silence. Do you believe that people are destined to follow the laws of their people? Or can they choose their own path? The question caught him off guard. He had spent most of his life studying alien cultures, their laws, and their customs. He had been taught to respect these things, but now, standing before Vera, he wasn't so sure. I think people should choose their own path, Lorien replied slowly, his voice thoughtful. Laws are important for order, but sometimes they don't capture the complexities of individual lives. We all have our own destinies to follow, and they can't always be defined by tradition. Vera's eyes softened at his words. I'm glad to hear you say that. I've often wondered if the laws of the Ellerith people are truly what is best for us. They were created long ago, and yet I can't help but feel that they are more of a cage than a guide. Lorien frowned, unsure of how to respond. He had heard whispers of unrest among the Ellerith people, of those who disagreed with their customs, but to hear the princess herself express doubt about her own culture was unexpected. You seem troubled, Your Highness, Lorien said carefully. Is there something on your mind? Vera looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing whether or not to share her thoughts. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I have been told all my life that my role is to uphold the laws, to be a symbol of tradition. But what if I don't agree with those laws? What if I want something different? Lorien was stunned. He had never imagined the princess would question the very system that had shaped her life. But now, in her eyes, he saw the truth. She was not just a princess. She was a woman with desires, doubts, and dreams of her own. I'm not sure what. The right answer is, she continued, I am expected to marry according to the law, to follow the tradition that has been passed down for generations. But I wonder if there is more to life than just fulfilling what others expect of me. Lorien's heart skipped a beat. Could this be the moment? Could this be the opening he had been waiting for? He had always admired Vera's strength, but now he saw her vulnerability. I don't have the answers for you, Vera, he said softly. But I do know that you don't have to face these questions alone. I may be a diplomat, but I've always believed that the best solutions come from understanding, from listening, from finding common ground. Vera's gaze shifted, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if she was trying to read him. For a moment, the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them standing in the garden. Do you think that we could ever find common ground, she asked, her voice low but filled with hope. Lorien hesitated, feeling a sudden surge of emotion. He knew that their worlds were far apart, her people, her laws, her expectations, and his own. But there was something about her that made him want to try to bridge the gap between them. I think, Lorien said slowly, that the world is full of possibilities. And maybe, just maybe one of those possibilities is finding a way for you to live the life you choose. Vera's eyes softened with a mixture of gratitude and longing. Perhaps, she murmured. Perhaps that's the path I need to find. As the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, Lorien felt a connection form between them, something deeper than he had anticipated. He wasn't sure where this journey would take them, but for the first time he knew that it was a journey he wanted to take alongside her. The days following their conversation in the royal garden felt like a whirlwind. Lorien found himself more and more drawn to Vera, and every time they met, it became harder to see her simply as a princess. She was a person, with thoughts, feelings, and a desire for more than the law had prescribed for her. But what could he do? He was a diplomat, sent here to represent his people and negotiate with the Ellerith. His mission was clear, yet every moment spent with Vera made him question what he really wanted. It was the evening of the 4th day since their conversation in the garden, when Vera summoned Lorien again. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the palace, and Lorien couldn't help but feel that this meeting would be different. He didn't know why, but something in the air seemed to change. As he entered the room where they had agreed to meet, he was surprised to find it empty, except for Vera. She stood by the window, looking out over the vast landscape. The soft sound of wind chimes echoed through the room, adding to the serene atmosphere. When she turned to face him, there was something in her eyes, a mixture of determination and vulnerability that caught him off guard. "Lorien," she said, her voice steady but with an undertone of something deeper. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about choosing my own path." Lorien stepped closer, careful not to intrude on her space, but his curiosity grew. "And what have you decided?" Vera took a deep breath, clearly gathering her thoughts. "I've decided that I can't keep living according to the rules set by others. I can't continue to follow a path that was decided for me before I even had a chance to choose my own. But the law, it's not that simple to break. If I do, there will be consequences." Lorien remained silent, waiting for her to continue. The weight of her words was heavy, but it was clear that she was conflicted, torn between her duty to her people and her desire for something more. "Lorien," she began again, her eyes locking with his, "I have a proposal for you. I want to marry, but not according to the law. I want to marry you." Lorien blinked, stunned. He had suspected that there was something deeper between them, but he had never imagined this. He wasn't sure if he had heard her correctly. "Me?" Lorien asked, his voice shaky. "But I'm a human. You're a princess, and I'm just a diplomat. This is unprecedented." Vera nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I know, but it's exactly because of that I want to break with tradition. I don't want to marry someone because it's what the law demands. I want to marry someone because I choose to. And I choose you." Lorien's heart raced as he tried to process what she was saying. It felt like a dream, something too surreal to be true. He had spent so much time focusing on the rules, the expectations, that he hadn't considered the possibility of something like this. Vera was offering him a chance to live a life that he hadn't even dared to imagine. "But Vera," he began, trying to make sense of it, "if you marry me, you risk everything. Your people, your family, your title. You could lose it all. Are you willing to do that for someone like me?" Vera's expression softened and she stepped closer to him, closing the distance between them. "I've spent my whole life following what's expected of me, but in doing so I've lost parts of myself. I've never had the chance to choose for myself. Marrying you wouldn't be a loss, Lorien. It would be a new beginning. And isn't that worth the risk?" Lorien was taken aback by her words. He had never thought of it that way. He had always seen his mission as a duty, something he had to do to maintain peace between his people and the Ellerith. But now, standing before Vera, he saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't asking him to take a step toward her. She was asking him to take a step with her. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is everything I've ever dreamed of, and yet, I don't know if I'm ready to risk so much. I'm just a diplomat, Vera. I don't belong to your world." Vera placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle yet firm. "Then let me be the one to risk everything, Lorien. You have nothing to lose. But if I don't take this chance, I will always wonder what could have been." Lorien's mind spun. The weight of her words settled deep within him. He had come to Velaris to do his job, to follow the rules and maintain order. But now, those rules seemed like walls he had built around himself, walls that kept him from living fully, from embracing the possibilities of what could be. He took a step back, his eyes scanning the room as he tried to make sense of everything. It felt like his world had shifted on its axis. Could he really say yes to something like this? Could he leave behind everything he knew for a life that seemed both impossible and beautiful? And yet, looking at Vera, he realized that maybe impossible wasn't the right word. Maybe it was just a matter of choice. "What are you asking, Vera?" he finally said, his voice steady now. "Are you asking me to leave everything behind and join you? To live here on this planet by your side?" Vera nodded slowly. "Yes, Lorien. I want you to join me, not just as a diplomat or a visitor, but as my partner. In every way. I want to build a future with you, a future that is ours alone." Lorien's heart swelled with emotions he had never felt before. This was everything he had feared and hoped for all at once. The life he had known had been structured, predictable, and safe. But what Vera was offering him was unknown. It was a life of uncertainty, but also a life of freedom. I don't know if I'm ready to make such a choice, Lorien confessed. But I think I'm ready to try. Vera smiled, her eyes sparkling with hope. That's all I ask, Lorien. Let's try together. And in that moment, as they stood there, the weight of their worlds upon them, Lorien knew that something profound had just begun. The road ahead would not be easy, but with Vera by his side, he felt like anything was possible. The days after Lorien's conversation with Vera felt like a whirlwind. He had been torn between his duty and his heart, struggling to balance the weight of his mission with the unexpected feelings that had grown for the princess. But what had started as a simple diplomatic meeting had turned into something far deeper, something he couldn't ignore. Lorien knew that Vera's proposal was more than just a personal request. It was a challenge to everything she had ever known. The Alarith laws were strict, and the consequences of breaking them were severe. If Vera married Lorien, there was no turning back. She would lose her position, her title, and her status among her people. The royal family had already made it clear that they did not approve of her questioning tradition, and her decision would have political ramifications that no one could foresee. Despite the weight of these challenges, Lorien couldn't help but feel a growing sense of admiration for Vera. She wasn't just a princess in name. She was a person who was willing to risk everything for what she believed in, and as he spent more time with her, he realized that he too was willing to take that risk. Yet as much as Lorien wanted to support Vera, he couldn't ignore the reality of their situation. He was a human diplomat, an outsider in the Alarith court. His people had only just begun to establish a relationship with the Alarith, and their alliance was still fragile. If he stayed, it could ruin everything they had worked for. The delicate peace between their two civilizations could shatter in an instant. One evening, Lorien sat in his quarters, staring out the window at the city below. The palace was quiet, the sound of the distant wind carrying the scent of alien flowers to his ears. He thought about Vera, about the quiet strength in her eyes and the way she had looked at him when she had asked him to stay. She had offered him a life that was uncertain but full of possibility, and yet as much as he wanted to accept her offer, he knew the consequences would be far-reaching. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. Lorien's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly rose to answer it. He wasn't surprised to see Vera standing there, her expression serious, yet there was something softer in her eyes. "Lorien," she said softly, her voice a mixture of resolve and uncertainty. "We need to talk." Lorien stepped aside, letting her enter. "What's on your mind, Your Highness?" Vera paused for a moment before speaking. "I've been thinking. I know I asked you to stay, but I didn't fully understand the weight of my request. I don't want to drag you into something that could harm you or your people. The consequences of breaking the law are more serious than I let on." Lorien frowned, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. "I've already considered that, Vera. I know the risks. But what you're asking is more than just a personal choice. It's a decision that could affect everything. The future of our people, our relationship with the Alarith, and your place in your society. You can't just throw all of that away." Vera's gaze faltered for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "I don't want to lose everything I've worked for either, but I also don't want to live a life where I'm constantly following someone else's rules. I've spent too long doing that." Lorien took a deep breath, his mind racing. He had never been one to avoid difficult decisions, but this was different. This wasn't just a political decision, it was a deeply personal one. He had come to Velaris to fulfill a diplomatic mission, but now he found himself caught between the life he had known and the uncertain future that Vera was offering him. "I understand, Vera," he said quietly, "but you need to understand something. I'm not just a diplomat here, I'm a human too. I've spent my whole life serving my people, doing what I thought was right, and now I'm being asked to make a choice that could change everything. I don't know if I'm ready for that." Vera nodded, her expression softening. "I don't expect you to have all the answers, Lorien. I just wanted you to know that I'm not asking you to make this decision for me. I'm asking you to choose for yourself. I won't force you to stay, but I don't want you to leave because of your duty. I want you to leave because it's what you truly want." Lorian's heart felt heavy in his chest. It was clear that Vera wasn't just asking him to break the rules. She was asking him to choose his own path, just as she had chosen hers. But the weight of that decision was not lost on him. The future of two worlds rested on his shoulders, and he wasn't sure he was ready to carry that burden. For the next few days, Lorian kept his distance from Vera, unsure of how to move forward. He spent his time meeting with the Alarith Council and attending diplomatic functions, but his thoughts were always with her. Every time he saw her, he was reminded of the impossible choice he had to make. It wasn't until a heated argument broke out in the council chambers that Lorian realized how fragile everything truly was. The Alarith Council had been discussing trade agreements and future alliances, but the topic quickly turned to Vera's actions. The council members were angry, their voices rising in anger as they accused her of abandoning tradition for a human diplomat. "You have defied the law, Princess," one of the counselors shouted. "Your actions could bring shame to the Alarith. You are threatening everything we've worked for." Lorian stood on the sidelines, watching as the situation spiraled out of control. Vera was calm, her eyes fixed on the council members with a steady, unwavering gaze. She wasn't afraid. She had made her decision, and she was ready to face whatever consequences it brought. "Perhaps it is time for a change," Vera said, her voice cutting through the noise. "I am not afraid to break with tradition, if it means choosing my own future." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment there was silence. The council members looked at her in shock, unsure of how to respond. Lorian could see the determination in her eyes, the same determination that had drawn him to her in the first place. And in that moment, Lorian knew that he had made his decision. He couldn't stay in the shadows any longer. If Vera was willing to fight for her future, then he would fight for it too. "Vera," he said, stepping forward, his voice strong, "I've thought long and hard about this, and I've realized something important. I'm not going to let duty dictate my life. I'm going to choose my own path, just as you've chosen yours, and I'm going to stay with you." The room fell silent again, but this time, the silence was filled with a sense of hope. The future was uncertain, but Lorian no longer feared it. He had found his path, and he was ready to walk it with Vera by his side. Lorian had made his decision. He had chosen to stay. But with that choice came a new wave of challenges. It wasn't just a matter of choosing to be with Vera. It was a matter of living with the consequences. The Alarith Council had made it clear that they did not approve of her decision to marry a human. They saw it as a betrayal of their laws, and many believed it could tear apart the very fabric of their society. The tension between the human colonies and the Alarith people had always been delicate, but now the stakes were higher than ever. Lorian knew that his decision to remain with Vera would have far-reaching consequences. The future of the alliance between their two civilizations could be at risk. The idea of peace and mutual understanding that they had worked so hard to build was now hanging in the balance. For the next few days, Lorian and Vera spent their time preparing for the inevitable conflict that would arise from their decision. Vera had not told anyone about their plan, but she knew that it would not be long before the council discovered the truth. She had already begun to prepare herself for the fallout. Her role as a leader was complicated enough without the added pressure of defying her people's laws, but she was determined to see this through. For once in her life, she wanted to make a decision based on what felt right to her, not on what was expected of her. One evening, after a long day of discussions and tense meetings, Lorian sat in his room, reflecting on everything that had happened. The weight of his decision pressed down on him, and for the first time since he had arrived on Valaris, he began to question whether he had made the right choice. Was he being selfish? Was he willing to risk so much just for his own happiness? His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. When he opened it, Vera stood before him, her face calm but her eyes betraying the worry that lingered beneath her composure. "Lorian," she said softly, "we need to talk." He stepped aside to let her in. "What's on your mind?" Vera closed the door behind her and took a deep breath. The council knows, she said, her voice tinged with frustration. They know about us, and they are furious. There's no denying it now. They are demanding that I make a choice. Either I return to tradition or I risk everything. Lorien felt a lump form in his throat. He had known this moment would come, but hearing it from Vera made it feel all the more real. What will you do? He asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Vera hesitated for a moment before answering. I'm not sure. I've spent my whole life following the laws of my people. I've always known what was expected of me. But now, with you, I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you. Lorien reached out and gently placed his hand on hers, offering her what little comfort he could. I understand, Vera, but we knew this wouldn't be easy, and we knew there would be consequences. Vera's gaze softened as she met his eyes. I thought I was prepared for this, but I wasn't ready to lose everything. My people, they'll never accept me, and even if they do, it will come at a great cost. Lorien felt a surge of determination. Then we will find a way, Vera. We can't let fear dictate our lives. If we truly believe in what we're doing, we have to stand by it. Together. Vera nodded slowly, a flicker of hope returning to her eyes. You're right. We can't turn back now. The next few days were a blur of meetings and discussions with the Alarith Council. The tension was thick in the air as the council members debated fiercely over Vera's future. Some were willing to let her make her own choice, but most were adamant that she must follow the laws of their people. There were even whispers that the council might remove her from her position as princess if she continued to defy them. Lorien stood by Vera's side through it all, his heart heavy with the uncertainty of their future. But he refused to let her face this alone. He knew that their decision would be difficult, but he also knew that the strength of their bond was undeniable. They had come too far to let anything break them apart now. Finally, after days of heated debates, the council called for one last meeting. This time it was not just about Vera's future. It was about the future of the Alarith people and their relationship with the human colonies. The fate of both worlds rested in the hands of the council. Vera stood at the center of the room, her back straight and her eyes fixed on the council members. Lorien stood beside her, his presence a quiet but steady support. The tension in the room was palpable as the councilors exchanged heated words, each one trying to sway the others to their side. At last, the head of the council, a stern-looking elder named Thalin, spoke. Princess Vera, he said, his voice cold but measured. You have brought shame upon this council and our people. You have chosen to defy the laws that have guided us for centuries. You have chosen a human over your own kind. You have made your choice, and now, we must make ours. Lorien's heart pounded in his chest as he waited for Thalin's verdict. He knew that no matter what happened, this moment would change everything. Thalin paused for a long moment, as if weighing the gravity of his decision. Finally he spoke, again. We will not remove you from your position, Princess. But understand this, your actions have consequences. If you choose to marry this human diplomat, you will be cast out from the royal line. You will no longer be a member of the Alarith royal family. Your future will be in your own hands. Vera's face remained calm, but Lorien could see the relief in her eyes. She had feared the worst, that they would strip her of everything she had worked for. But this was a chance to live her life on her own terms. She turned to Lorien, her voice steady. I've made my choice. Lorien squeezed her hand, his heart swelling with pride. They had made it through the storm, and now together, they would forge a new path. No longer bound by tradition, they could finally begin building the future they both desired. The decision had been made. Vera and Lorien stood together at the crossroads of their futures, their hearts intertwined by the bond they had formed despite the odds. It had been a journey filled with uncertainty, fear, and moments of doubt. But now, as they faced the consequences of their choices, they knew that they had to move forward, no matter what came next. The Alarith Council had given their verdict. Vera was no longer part of the royal family. Her position, her title, and everything that came with it were stripped away. But as she stood beside Lorien, she no longer felt the weight of those losses. She had chosen to follow her heart, and for the first time in her life, she felt free. The days following the council's decision were filled with tension. Word of Vera's choice had spread quickly, and the people of Velaris were divided. Some viewed her as a traitor, while others admired her courage. But through it all, Vera and Lorien remained united, knowing that their decision had not only changed their lives, but the future of their people. Lorien had spent the past few days meeting with the Elarith ambassadors, trying to maintain the fragile peace between the human colonies and the Elarith. It was a difficult task, as many on both sides were unsure of what to make of the changes that were unfolding. But Lorien was determined to prove that their alliance could survive, even in the face of such uncertainty. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Lorien returned to the palace. Vera was waiting for him in their new quarters, a room that had been set aside for them by the council. It wasn't much, just a small space in the corner of the palace, but it was theirs. And for now, that was all that mattered. "Lorien," Vera said, her voice soft but filled with resolve. "We've made it this far, but what comes next?" Lorien smiled and walked over to her, taking her hand in his. "What comes next is up to us. We've already crossed the hardest part. Now we get to build our own future." Vera nodded, her eyes shining with a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "I never thought I'd be here. I never thought I'd be in this position. But now that I am, I can't imagine going back to the way things were." Lorien gently pulled her into a hug. "You don't have to go back. We're creating something new, something better. We have the chance to build a future where we're not bound by old laws and traditions, where we can make our own choices." Vera smiled, resting her head on his chest. "I never knew what freedom truly meant until now." As the days passed, Lorien and Vera worked together to navigate the challenges of their new life. The Elarith Council had not completely turned their backs on Vera. Though she had lost her title and her place in the royal family, they had allowed her to remain on the planet and continue her work. She wasn't a princess anymore, but she was still a respected figure among her people. There were difficult moments, of course. Many Elarith still viewed her decision as a betrayal, and some of the human ambassadors struggled to understand the complexities of their relationship. But over time, Lorien and Vera were able to show both sides that their love was more than just an act of rebellion. It was a symbol of unity. Their bond transcended the barriers between their species, and slowly others began to see that the future they were building could benefit both the Elarith and the humans. As time went on, Vera became a leader in her own right. She worked with the Elarith and human diplomats, using her unique position to bridge the gap between the two civilizations. She wasn't the princess anymore, but she was a force to be reckoned with, respected by those who had once opposed her. Lorien, too, found his place in this new world. He was no longer just a diplomat, sent to represent his people. He was a partner in a new alliance, someone who had helped create something more than just a political agreement. He had found his purpose in helping build a future where both humans and Elarith could live together side by side, and as the months turned into years, their bond only grew stronger. The challenges they had faced were not forgotten, but they had overcome them together. Vera had found her place in a world where she was no longer defined by the laws of her people, and Lorien had found a life that was filled with meaning, purpose, and love. One day, as they stood on the balcony of their new home overlooking the peaceful city of Velaris, Vera turned to Lorien, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You know, I think we've made something beautiful," she said softly. Lorien nodded, his heart full. "We have, and it's just the beginning." Vera's gaze softened as she looked out at the horizon. "We've built something together. A future. A life." Lorien wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "And there's nothing more important than that." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the city. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Lorien and Vera felt ready to face whatever came next. Together, they had built something stronger, than just a relationship. They had built a legacy, and no matter what the future held, they knew they would always have each other.